Firstly, apologies for the technical difficulties. So, what I'm going to be doing is repeating a lot of what I've already said in the public meeting, so apologies for those who were there. But then we'll move on to just having a more fun discussion. So, fantastic start for us. It was 5 candidates stood in West Northamptonshire constituency, and that in itself was a big deal for what is still a relatively small coalition, especially when the steering committee only formed in January of this year. Some of us actually came a little bit later into the steering committee, so we're very new. We achieved 735 votes between us, and on our first go of standing in Northampton, I think that is not a number to be sniffed at. That's 735 people who saw TUSC against cuts as a worthwhile endeavour. Nationally, we achieved over 46,000 votes. Turnout was low, but the mood was of frustration and completely understandable belief that nobody will change anything, so why bother? But this is exactly why we stood. Even before the local election results were announced, the Hartlepool by-elections were a foreshadowing of the local election results to come, and an absolute vindication for TUSC's decision to stand against them. Labour took a hammering in England, remained unpopular in Scotland, and gained only a modest victory in Wales. Labour right-wingers like Margaret Hodge were quick to point the finger of blame at Corbyn, despite Labour significantly increasing its lead in Hartlepool under Corbyn's leadership. In fact, the decline of the Labour Party coincides perfectly with its unapologetic rightward political shift. Even under Corbyn, the 2019 election was lost largely because Corbyn was pushed by the Labour right to support a second EU referendum, despite the Leave vote long since cast and the fact that Corbyn himself is an EU sceptic. In reality, Corbyn, whether you liked him or not, had socialist policies, which were incredibly popular with a significant layer of the working class in this country. In 2017, when Theresa May called the snap election, it was as out of touch with the working class as the Blairites who tried to sabotage Corbyn. She and the Blairites and Labour were ready for a big Tory majority, but Corbyn's programme saw significant gains for Labour, despite the internal attacks on him from his own party. If you think this panicked the Tories, remember those scenes on the BBC and ITV and Sky, cameras on Labour right-wingers who were disappointed in the increase in support for Labour for their own party under Corbyn. What they did over the next 2 years was attempt one of the most vicious coups of a Labour leader since the militant expulsions of the 1980s and 1990s. When Corbyn conceded and Starmer won his leadership position, he promised to maintain much of Corbyn's manifesto promises because he knew they were popular with the membership, but unsurprisingly this was a ruse to take back full control of the party for the Blairites. Starmer was quick to sack Corbyn's allies such as Rebecca Long-Bailey, Dawn Butler, John Trickett and Richard Burden. While Corbyn tried to appease the Labour right when he became leader by inviting them onto his cabinet, they only used their position to weaken his. Corbyn's soft position cost him his chance at number 10. Starmer's rightward shift has cost Labour a chance of winning, possibly for many elections to come. The reality is that most people, even in fact especially those who are not particularly political, are left of Labour. When Socialist Party candidates have done our stalls, the majority of people we speak to, even those who approach us to disagree with us, support the NHS, support nationalisation of transport, utilities, other vital services. They want rent caps, they want the super wealthy to pay their taxes. People don't want war in the Middle East, or anywhere for that matter. They don't want Trident, they don't want the schools to become academies, they don't want people to be relying on food banks, and they absolutely don't want cuts and job losses. In Northampton, every single person I've spoken to about the financial crisis of this council knows that the Tories are to blame and haven't fixed the problem. So when people like the local Labour leader or ex-Labour leader Danielle Stone complain about the Tories being rewarded for their failure, asking why did people vote for a failing Tory council, they didn't. The Tories didn't increase their vote share, certainly not in Northampton. This was not a Tory victory, it was a failure of the Labour Party to present any alternative. The majority of people didn't vote. Many of the people I spoke to in the lead up to these elections said I don't trust any of them. TUSC candidates here in Northampton responded, neither do we. We stood exactly because politicians can't be trusted to represent the needs of ordinary people, and with MPs ever increasing salaries and the career perks of being a councillor, they're further alienated from their constituents. Having a quick browse of election turnouts, they are the highest in the most wealthy areas: St Albans, Winchester, Oxford, Twickenham. The lowest turnouts are in some of the most deprived areas, like Glasgow, Manchester Central, Leeds Central, overwhelmingly majority working class areas. But it's not because working class people don't care. On the campaign trail we met some very caring people. They were not wealthy, they had their own struggles, but they still organised for those worse off. Look at what happened in Glasgow this week. 300 residents came out to block the Home Office from deportations of immigrants. On the streets of Northampton today, people risked significant fines to protest against the Israeli state in solidarity with Palestinians who they will likely never meet. People do care. They just simply don't trust the political establishment, including, even especially, Labour under Starmer's leadership. They don't feel represented by Labour anymore. They don't see any genuine change coming from Labour councillors, and we've seen this across the water. Joe Biden got into office by the skin of his teeth, not because people liked Trump. Trump lost popularity incredibly quickly into his term when the establishment ticket he used to get into office quickly proved to be a farce. But Biden's platform of "I'm not Trump" was not a good one. It was a very tight contest. Yet Labour learned nothing from this and played the "we're not Boris" and "we're not the Tory council who messed up your town" card. The Tories have a strong loyal base among the middle class and even layers of the working class in the local area, who believe that they could one day be in a position to benefit from the Tories' pro-big business agenda. People who aspire to be incredibly wealthy will often vote Tory. Even those who don't have these aspirations, many will have voted Tories because, although they did an awful job of handling the pandemic, they've taken credit for the vaccine rollout, which has been incredibly effective at tackling the health and economic crisis we're facing. Unfortunately, thanks to their big business donors, the Tories have a fairly good PR team who kept the press sweet. It's a huge mistake of the Labour right to think that the Tories are popular and shifting closer to them politically is going to get them into office. Blair's election success came from the Tories' failure in the mid-90s, and this is the pattern of Britain's two-horse race. In fact, to use that analogy, the horses may change but they're slow, and the winning horse is not the best of its stock, but the one who doesn't collapse before the finish line. Folks, we see this play out every year, and it's not just in this country. The ruling parties and the opposition party not offering anything substantial to the people, because capitalist parties can offer little else but token gestures, hoping the other side will collapse under the weight of its own political failings. All parties, including the Tories and Starmer's New Labour, that defend the capitalist system end up implementing policies and further undermine the living standards of the working class majority. So when people tell me don't stand against Labour, don't let the Tories win, we have to get them out by voting Labour, they're asking me to perpetuate in the two-horse race where nobody wins except the ruling class. They're asking me to vote for the Tories in red ties instead of the Tories in blue ties. In reality, what would only win electoral success would not only win electoral success but bring ordinary people, working class people, back into politics, is actively and on a huge scale engaging in a new mass workers' party. A party made up of the many for the many, not careerists looking to feather their own nests. It would have to be structured very differently to the Labour Party. It would have to be transparent, membership-led, have strict mandatory reselection processes. It would need to welcome the left and be incorruptible by anyone on the right who attempts to infiltrate. The Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition is an attempt to build such a party. TUSC have at least given the people of England, Scotland and Wales a genuine socialist anti-austerity option in as many places as we could stand. While our vote share was modest, our message, when it was heard, was and is popular. I convinced every non-voter that I spoke to not only to vote for us, but in some cases to put up posters on their own street. It's worth remembering the Labour Party was a small force for its first 20 years. That was despite the stark need for a workers' party at the time. What dramatically increased its success was linking up with the trade unions and smaller left groups and parties. As the Labour Party distanced itself more and more from socialism and the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition is slowly picking up. A mass workers' party will not arise out of opportunism or watering down of our political programme to appeal to layers of the upper class or the upper middle class. A mass workers' party will build confidence in the working class through struggle in our workplaces, our schools and universities, our hospitals, our local and national government offices, and anywhere where ordinary people are facing the impact of capitalism's exploitative nature. A mass workers' party would, through its battles and its programme, unite the working class of all backgrounds to fight the common enemy. It can be done. We saw what one council that stood up to the Tories could achieve in Liverpool under the militant-led council in the 1980s, where instead of cuts they created jobs and services. Instead of selling of council housing, they built and expanded existing council homes to meet the needs of constituents. They were so popular that people took to the streets in solidarity with their council to support the work that they were doing. They increased Labour's vote share dramatically despite the internal Labour coup against them and the media smear campaign. Militant was ultimately defeated by its own party, expelling leading members at first, then anyone who stood with militant tendency. Now many of those Labour militant members are standing for TUSC or part of the TUSC steering committee. So where next for TUSC? I invite everybody who's watching today, share your thoughts and your experiences, share your criticism as well, we welcome that. Northampton TUSC has every intention of standing again and building for the general election in 2024. We'll be looking to work with local trade unionists, community groups and left parties to create a needs budget to counter the cuts budget that will no doubt be around the corner. We will continue campaigning in our individual capacity but always carrying the TUSC banner. We need more supporters. We will need more candidates in the next local elections. We will need to get the word out so to those disillusioned non-voters that TUSC is worth voting for. And I hope everybody watching will be part of that movement. Thank you. First and foremost, the biggest thank you I need to give is to the candidates. We've got all but one here today who stood in this election. It's not an easy thing to do to put yourself out there, especially as I think all but myself only learnt about TUSC this year. And of course Seamus knew about TUSC as well. And I want to say to give you a kind of trophy for what you've done. I have got you all a little something. Thank you. Ooh. This is my Mary Poppins bag.
Thank you. Livestream gold.
Okay, brilliant. So
Video gold.
Good luck getting into it. Jeez. So also it was an learning experience, definitely. One of the things we learned is that the importance of having an election agent, and I definitely threw Georgia into the position with very little notice, but of course she very gracefully said yes. But not only that, the role that Georgia played in helping us to produce our very, very nice material, which we will definitely be asking for her help with in the future. I also have got something for Georgia, a trophy for your achievement in what you did in this election. So thank you very much. I also want to say a massive thank you to everyone who nominated our candidates. We couldn't have stood without the nominations. I want to thank everyone who leafleted. People came out and helped us, knowing that we were going to get a small turnout, but they wanted to make sure people heard our message, and I appreciate them for doing that. People who put up posters on their windows, who talked to their friends and convinced their friends to vote for us, and who gave us support in every way that they could. I want to thank those people as well, but we're going to need more people to get involved, so continue talking to people, continue to ask how you can help us, and we'll tell you. Certainly I will. Yeah, I think that covers what I wanted to say, but yeah, thank you all for what was a really, really worthwhile campaign. I'm really glad we did it. I hope you guys are glad you did it as well.
Yeah, very glad.
Yeah.
I mean, she's very quiet there.
Yeah,
Are you glad you did it?
Yes, I'm happy. Of course, I'm happy. And what I can say is, being a migrant, in this country, that was a good thing for me, And it was an opportunity to do this for the first time in my life. Well, to be honest, if I was back in my country, I would never had that chance to stand for the elections. So, to be honest, I'm happy that I'm here, and I'm happy to have a nice and wonderful team here with you guys. And I'm hoping in the future we're gonna get at least one seat here in Northampton and do a big damage to the councillors there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No more £8,000 meetings.
Yeah, exactly. That £8,000 for one meeting is crazy.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, in total, Even on the Northamptonshire was bigger, isn't it? 14,000.
14,000.
So what is served there? What, crabs with gold and all that stuff? They drink from
Like, don't these people know you can hire a marquee? Like, come on.
Oh Jesus! What, they standing on the hotel or what?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Ashley just had a call around and found like places, similar sizes.
Oh, it's
for
crazy.
a fraction of the price. It's like, they seem to always have to go, well, no, we have to go for like the nicest. Oh yes, £8,000 because you need to get 93 councillors there. And
Well, I know for sure that Franklin's Garden is very expensive. The reason why I'm saying that because the company I work for we used to organize the Christmas party there, and it was very expensive. And even if you went for the party, it was expensive there, yeah. So, but I don't know how they came up with that. They had to do it in the Franklin's Garden.
Someone's got a friend.
Friend of the friend of the friend.
Yeah. And it's like, we'll help you.
Yeah.
You
It's
help
be like the
us.
same friend that allowed them to build on reservation land.
Yeah, the same friends who were involved probably in some of the football fiasco.
Exactly.
Probably
that,
some friends who were involved in
I wanted to say that, yeah.
Angel Square and the very expensive carpet of Angel Square probably came from a friend as well.
The thing is, the argument on Angel Square is now it's too small. So now it's too small for the bigger wider council. It was too small anyway. Like, if anything shows how inept the last council is that they built a headquarters that couldn't fit all its people in.
Yeah, but
even then.
they can't really use it.
But they couldn't anyway.
Yeah.
It was too small. People were encouraged to hot desk and work out of town.
Yeah, definitely. One of the campaigns I think that is going to be at the forefront is pushing for non-EU and EU citizens to still continue with their right to vote. I think council elections, I don't know, but parliament elections are a tricky one. So fighting for rights of EU citizens to be able to vote, to stay, I think is going to be really important. And also to be able to stand again, because I want Dimitri to stand again.
I got no problem with standing,
fact that
but
you're from Romania shouldn't be
unfortunately,
a
well,
barrier
even
to
my
that.
colleagues at Cordoba, they say, well, Dimitri, this is a step forward, in the future you can go for the parliament. I said, well, I wish, but unfortunately the law doesn't permit that. But what I can do, all I can do now at the moment, I can give you support on the next coming general elections by spreading the news about TUSC and our candidate, which is going to be there, and we have to push the campaign for the EU's. For the EU citizens to get a vote in the parliament, and not just the EU citizen, all the citizens of the UK, either they are UK citizens or non-UK citizens, to have a right to have a right to say to put their vote on the general election, because after all, if they came into this country and they establish here and they want to carry on with their lives here, they should have that right as well. Not just on the local elections, also on the general elections as well. They have to have their say.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
It also stops the rightward tack.
Yeah.
If you have an entire electorate group of EU and non-EU migrants who have a vested interest, then you can't actually just demonise them for 10, 15 years.
No.
It's a fact. Because ultimately you just alienated a voter base.
So one of the excuses of the Labour councillors on this occasion was the gerrymandering that went on, and it's true that the local council did very carefully divide this authority so that they will stay in power. That being said, someone from the Save Northampton Services pointed out that even if it hadn't been that way, they still wouldn't have won seats. They just did not appeal to people locally, but mostly on a national level. I don't know if anybody saw the absolutely dire, I think it was Good Morning Britain interview with one of the Labour. I can't
It was
remember.
John Ashworth, wasn't it?
That's the one.
Yeah.
And he was
John
asked,
Ashworth.
what do you stand for? And, it's
His
confidential.
wife, Emily Oakeshott, who was supposed to be the Parliament, she was supposed to replace what's what's her name, Jenny Formby. She's supposed to replace Jenny Formby until they realised that actually, yeah, she was in the leaked document as a wrecker, and he's still a cabinet member. It's an absolute farce. Shadow cabinet member. The thing is though, so the problem with that is the same problem we have with actual voter reform. It's the only people who want it are lost. Like, no one's ever going, actually, like, when we win, we'll actually look at implementing some form of voter reform. It was in that Lib Dem manifesto in 2010 that was very fun. That was good, wasn't it? That lasted about a week.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. It's all well and good moaning now, but it's part of a wide attack. Nationally, constituency boundaries have been renewed 4 times in 20 years, all of which to give the Tories an inherent advantage. And this is before we consider the fact that Scottish independence is a certainty. Welsh independence is probably coming.
Yeah.
We're left in an English Shires kind of wide.
Well, England's just going to keep on isolating itself until it's like, you know, back in the day when it was like Mercia.
Yeah.
And,
Northampton,
you know,
Mercia, Essex, and so on.
Yeah, and
East
eventually
Anglia,
it will
I
just
know.
be
The
tribes
NIP
of England, won't it?
The NIP movement, the Independence Party movement, comes from a real place of, like, devolution doesn't happen, and actually, northern government for northern people, it works, and that's the problem.
I think a lot of it is a reaction to the fact that everything's in London.
Yeah.
Everything is so focused on London and how well London's doing, how we help London.
And then everything else is like benched
Get on
by
with
that.
it. Give up
Yeah,
yourselves.
like, it's all what
But the solution to it is so neoliberal. It's alright, we'll have an office in Durham. No, you're missing the point here. It's not that everything in terms of actually where things are being made is in London. It's that the epicenter of your political and strategic planning, that is London.
Yeah.
Instead of actually anything to improve the circumstances, it's just, no, we'll build a nice, lovely thing in York. Like, that's not helping anybody, it's just a nice new office.
And I think that a lot of people need to kind of like realise that the local elections are probably more important than the national ones. Because the local people are the ones who are deciding the local stuff.
Yeah.
If people only ever go out to vote for the general election, then it's like you're missing all of this other stuff that you could be having more control over now.
Yeah. But I was sort of thinking of it at, kind of with the illustration that, you know, your local elections are almost your little bricks within the wall, and you know, if all those votes are, you know, Tory or Labour, then all you're going to get is this sort of, you know, fractured political framework that's headed by, you know, these general elections. But you know, it is so important to actually have those councillors who are going to challenge that two-party system, that are going to challenge those like right-wing Labour or Tories. That's where the change starts. You know, it has to start on a local basis. It has to be the communities, working class communities, actually saying, yes, I can go out and I can get my voice heard. You know, and by doing that, then you can start to change things on a more national level. And you know, when that starts, then international isn't, you know, that far off.
Yeah, and actually that's a really good point, and I think it's so important that people don't downplay the role that local councillors can play. Local councillors can do so much, sometimes more than what MPs can do, because local councillors can actually very easily amass campaigns with their communities against budget cuts, also against evictions. One of the things that's going to be happening is the housing situation is going to change dramatically now. On the 31st of May, the eviction ban is going to be lifted, and people are going to be out on the streets if there's no campaign against that. And although we've not got much time, I think if we put out some kind of pointers now to say, you know, if you're facing eviction, get in touch, because the ban should have been extended. You know, we've got the Indian variant now. The idea that, you know, it's safe for people to be out on the streets regardless of COVID is ridiculous.
There's also like Mackenzie Friendship training available to help people to be someone that they can go to court with if they don't have any support, and to kind of give a bit of advice and stuff like that. So you don't need to be like a a solicitor necessarily, but having one helps.
Yeah, it does, yeah, no, definitely. So we're going to be working with the housing campaign, Northamptonshire housing campaign, in the near future. I think that's going to be the immediate kind of issue, and also challenging the council over this expensive.
Everything.
Yeah, I mean it's.